in hindsight, like I was doing the delicate dance of not getting canceled, but bringing up these issues. Like there was a bit of, hey, you're fat shaming stuff that I ignored because I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like I gotta bring up this issue because it's life and death, right? Like I'm not gonna lie and say there's not a link with obesity and death, especially when you saw how horrible a death people had when it came to COVID. Like there was a sense of duty there. But where I got the most heat, and our family still has a little bit of PTSD about this, was around school closures. Like I was a big advocate about keeping schools open locally, and I'm from an area in Canada where we had the longest school closures in Ontario, and so I was very front and center about saying the detrimental impacts of that, and we got tons of heat. We got attacks on our family online. We got threats to my job. That's where we got the most, unfortunately, difficulty. But I'm a father of three. There was no way I was not going to express concern about something that was so obvious.
And Doc, just from obviously your standpoint, being a subject matter expert in seeing this, I'm guessing that was rooted in the fact that you realized firsthand that kids weren't really at risk, and that it was not worth it. All these closures, because the mental health effects, and them not being in school and being socialized and all these things, and they're isolated. That was far worse than the very, very, very small sliver of a risk that you all had identified. Is that accurate? And why do you think, like the Canadian government and in our government, like why didn't they embrace that medical viewpoint? Like that's why I scratch my head. It's like we're all on the same team. So why did it come to that? What was their actual motive? Because there had to be smart dudes like you briefing these people, I would think, right?
Yeah. Honestly, Bear, like I could feel my blood pressure go up right now, like just thinking about it, because it was to me it was crazy. Like I'll give you everyone a first pass on the first wave. Like we didn't know what the hell everything, but as you mentioned, it was very clear early on kids weren't at risk. Like to put it in perspective, like where are you guys recording this right now?
Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach. So say if you're driving your crew 3 hours away, like a car trip, 3 hours away to a destination with your kids in the car. That was more dangerous than COVID was. Like just facts to our kids, and we ignored this. And the thing is, the nature of my job as an ICU doc is I gotta look at things holistically. This is one of those specialties where you can't, like, I'm not a heart specialist where I'm just focusing on the heart. Whereas if you come to an ICU, I gotta make sure all your organs are being accounted for. So your kidneys, if this medication affects your kidneys, how's it going to affect your heart? How's it going to affect your lungs? How do I balance these things? And so our governments, the people in charge, that's their job, to look at things holistically. And so when you know that 98, I'm using that number randomly, 98% of the population had little to worry about, or whatever the actual percentage was, and the least by far, thank God, was our kids. Let them live, because all the, as you mentioned, all this stuff was very predictable. That you tell me a kid that is 2 years old that is masked is not going to affect their socialization, their speech, their future. The kids that are teenagers that are losing their grads and so forth. When once again, we know for example, you're not going to get COVID outside. Okay, like I still to this day have not been convinced of a transmission that occurred outdoors, and we didn't embrace that. Put the kids outside for their grad, let them feel human again, and we ignored this shit. Like this to me was crazy, and this is once again when to answer your question directly about why we were doing this is fear-based decision making. I don't want to make the wrong call. I don't want to have that one kid or the kid that had a negative outcome on my shoulders, and it just got way too far. And the other part of it too is people that were making the decisions often they had nothing to lose, right? Like they were able to have their Zoom meetings. Like I live in Ontario, or in my city, it's not 70% government work, so you're getting paid no matter what. You're getting paid whether you're working or not on Zoom. So I'm comfortable with the status quo. Whereas if you made those people uncomfortable, if you knew their paycheck was going to be affected by all these closures and such, different decisions were going to be made.
And one of the things you kicked off with when Bear asked about your book is kind of regarding value-based leadership. In those first, let's go back to the first wave. When that hit, you obviously at some point were willing to kind of cut against the grain, which you've been speaking of like, hey, something isn't sitting right with me. I'm going to go speak out about this. Did you have any thoughts initially? Like, did you find yourself kind of falling in order as far as like whatever kind of the group think that was happening? And then did you have to make a conscious decision, or is that just who you are to the core and there was no hesitation at all when it was time to make that decision?
Oh, I was the soldier. I was following direction the whole time. Like at the beginning, like there was so much information about how scary this was. We were right on. We were aligned. We were following the rules. We were, you know, it was an area where I felt like we were still learning, but things became pretty clear as we start to gain experience that, hey, you know, we really should rethink this a bit. Like when I was seeing not healthy people, when I was seeing that we were able to protect ourselves early on, it is funny. Like I was just doing an interview before this, and it was probably about 2 weeks in or a week in. My wife and I were sitting at the kitchen table, and Tony, like I'm a bit of an instinctual person. Like I like to lean on my instincts a little bit. Like people don't like to listen to their gut often, but to me, my gut has served me well clinically and in life. And my wife is very analytical and likes to make sure we cross all the T's. And I remember after a week or two of the pandemic, I looked towards her, I'm like, Kathy, something's not right here. Like something doesn't feel good about this. Like I know they're telling us 2 weeks. I know we're telling us that this will get better and the schools should stay closed. And I'm assuming they're right or whatever, but doesn't this feel wrong? Doesn't it feel icky? And man, were we ever on point with that one? Holy cow.